Hi, my name is Zachary Reese, and today I'm going to be talking about, for my presentation, I would like to share a QA's life in Agile Scrum development. So the reason behind picking this was to provide something a little bit different, um, presentation with a little something that's less technical and a little more um, from my point of view and my perspective. I had worked at my company. I worked for a year as a QA, probably a QA engineer. This is the first job that I had with after receiving my undergraduate degree, and it taught me a lot, not just about agile in general, but about software development and how important a QA's role is in the software development lifecycle. So, uh, just kind of give an outline of what we're going to talk about. I'm going to give a little bit of a definition of what Scrum is so that you can understand QA within the context of Agile Scrum. Then I would like to talk about the QA role specifically, what quality automation is, and how we can apply a quality automation effectively or quality assurance effectively to the software system. And also go into further detail of the role of a QA and why this is important for testing and verification, and how it can provide a more effective software system. And then to wrap up, just kind of bulleted points of the overall roles and purposes of a QA. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what is Agile Scrum? You may be familiar if you've worked in a software development company or worked within software development at a company recently. Agile has been a methodology that's taken over a lot of businesses' development sectors, and more specifically, Scrum has been utilized. There are different forms of team compositions you can have within Agile, but Scrum is one methodology that a lot of them lean towards. So, what is Scrum? Scrum is a process framework used to manage product development and other knowledge work. Um, Essentially, I kind of already explained a little bit what this is. It's a subsection of Agile, basically where we form teams of, say, 7 to 9 people, where you typically have a product owner who is aware of product domain knowledge, a scrum master who manages the calendars and works on the time and helps to assign tasks and keep the project moving. And then with the rest of the roles, you can have a composition. You typically have more developers than testers. So say maybe like a 3 to 2 or a 4 to 2 ratio of developer to tester. And that's typically what a Scrum team is composed of. Then Scrum is also empirical in that it provides a means for teams to establish a hypothesis of how they think something works, try it out, reflect on the experience, and to make appropriate adjustments. Essentially, what this is saying is the whole Scrum experience is about being able to adjust to change, a willingness to try out new things, to see what works, what doesn't work, and to be able to adjust whenever needed. All for the sake of providing not only a better development experience, but greater efficiency and a hopes to deliver a better product overall. And then finally, we have Scrum is structured in a way to allow teams to incorporate practices from other frameworks where they make sense for the team's context. So this is a little bit about what I had mentioned previously about the team composition, but this applies more to whatever software that you're developing. Say that it is a bigger system, we would like to bring in more people. So we would have Agile groups rather than Agile Scrum. There's a name for it. I can't think of it off the top of my head, but there are different methodologies and practices under Agile, Scrum being one. And if necessary, we can bring in other ones and change the team composition to do what we have to. Okay, so now the crux of what we're getting into. What is a QA? QA, as previously stated, is quality assurance. And so a quality assurance engineer is the person responsible for assessing the quality of specifications and technical design documents in order to ensure timely, relevant, and meaningful feedback. So what does this mean? Quality assurance engineer is essentially a person who receives the software, so say that we're within a 2-week Scrum, and a user story is completed development after 1 week. We have an additional week left, and the code gets handed off from the developer to the QA, and the QA will test the software. They'll make sure that it meets acceptance criteria. They'll make sure that there are no bugs or defects or issues or anything else involved that could overall be detrimental to the software system. They're in charge of making sure that the software is moving from the proper development environments. So, for example, at my company, we work in a structure where it goes to a pre-did environment and it's build, and then it moves up to a did environment, then a fit, then an IAT, and then a final production environment. So it goes through these different stages, and the quality assurance engineer ensures that not only is the code being tested in these environments, but that it's working as specified and ensuring that it's meeting the correct quality. Oh, come on just a second. Okay. So yes, along with making sure that it makes it through these cycles, they're in charge of making sure that proper code is working in a timely manner, that it's delivered within the desired sprint. If it's ever needed, it's usually just broken off into the next sprint for a story for the QA to complete their testing. And also to provide proper feedback to development, to the Scrum Master, and to the product owner to make sure that the code, user story, or defect fix that's been delivered is meeting expectations and is what is desired. So along with this, they're involved in planning and implementing strategies for quality management and testing. So this entails a lot of different things. In my experience as a QA, we worked closely with the Scrum Master and the product owner, not just in demos, but constantly being in communication to ensure that development is meeting expectations and that we're supposed to, that whatever software we're trying to deliver is behaving accordingly. And so software working as expected can entail many different things. So for example, with bigger software systems, you're going to have it not just important that it works within the environment without breaking anything else or having too much of a detrimental impact to the existing product, but also ensuring that the software is, the APIs are running properly, that there are no additional errors or anything being touched. It's more of a mindset of having QA be the tester rather than developer, even though it's highly encouraged these days for the developer to also be aware of testing and to develop in a test-driven development state of mind. So, in a sense, the Scrum Master is also somewhat of, or the QA is also somewhat of a Scrum Master. They have to be aware of dates. They have to be time cognizant and prepared to not only complete their testing in a timely manner, but making sure that developers and development is on track. It's not their primary job, but it's kind of like a secondary side job that they have to ensure that things are being delivered on time. So lastly, we talked about what a QA is and some of their responsibilities, but what does this look like when you walk into the office? What are the responsibilities of a quality assurance engineer? So one thing that they typically do is black box and white box testing, which is something we've gone over in this course and had some experience with, making sure that code is or sections of code and overall code products are testing out fine. So JUnit testing or any other kind of unit testing. We have another example further down the list, so we'll talk about one form of testing that they're in charge of. So along with this, they need a deep knowledge of the internal workings of the application. If you're going to be testing something, it's very, very important for you to understand the overall software product so that you know that it's working properly in the right context. So they also work in parallel with development. And it's important for testing to not only start when the code is finally produced, but it's also a state of mind before the code is checked in. So for example, there were many times where we were expecting a development user story to be done within a day or two. And so with that being said, as a QA, it would be very important to go ahead and set up unit tests if necessary. You can set a template up for it, but also to come up with use cases to get test clients ready. Sometimes you have to create the test clients from scratch for specific stories and specific functionalities, making sure that all of your scenarios are covered so that you don't miss anything and that there's potential for bugs or defects. And so all of this preparation is done to ensure that once the code is finally delivered, you can get your testing done within a day or two, and then as soon as possible, the code can be demoed and get approval from the PO or the product owner and the Scrum Master. So it's an ongoing process. It's not just once the code is delivered is when you begin testing. Testing really starts whenever the user story is in the inception of the user story, So now we have another responsibility is the automation testing. I briefly mentioned testing a minute ago with black box and white box testing. Automation testing is a little more involved with, so for example, there are structures like Cucumber and Gherkins. This is just to help with much larger systems that are running several different functions. If you plug in a new function and get the automation testing ready, this cuts out some time for not only development but for the QA engineer. It cuts out, or it helps to cover cases that you may forget, just basically to ensure that everything is being met in a timely manner. And automation is just a really helpful tool to make sure that your bases are covered, essentially. So along with that, the QA is closely coupled with development team. This just means that it's a constant communication between the two. I know within Agile Scrum methodologies, they have daily stand-ups, so we usually meet for 15 to 30 minutes to talk about things that we're doing. So you're almost forced to constantly be in communication with one another to make sure that when code is ready, or if there's additional scenarios that the developer believes needs to be covered, or they have some kind of testing that they aren't sure about, so they can contact the QA. It works both ways for them. And then it's important for the QA to be business savvy, to understand what, not just the product itself, but they're essentially the customer. They have to ensure that acceptance criteria is being met, and that whatever is being delivered is what is expected, that it makes sense for the product, that it meets a standard that has been set and a precedence. And so overall, just to make sure that the product is being delivered properly. So the QA has many looks, and many things that we went through. The QA engineer, is the tester essentially, and it's extremely important for a team to have at least one or two if you're in an Agile Scrum environment. Because without them, your code, it puts a lot more pressure on development to deliver a proper software structure and software project. So this is all I have for my presentation. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed. Thank you.